As of starting this recording, it's 11:43 p.m. and we're going to read some scary stories. So, in this case actually, we're going to be reading some unsolved murders. And I'm actually excited about this one. I feel like excited isn't the right word because we're talking about murders, but I'm just going to go with it. I'm excited to read these because they're more lengthy and a lot of these are ones we obviously haven't covered. I know number 2 on the list is something we've already covered. I believe it was let me look. It was the Black Delilah um, death, which was the woman, if you don't remember, who was cut in half and left on the side of the road. It looked like her whole body was drained of blood. We're not going to be reading that because we already know and we already read it. So we're going to start with Jack the Ripper terrorized London. So let's just jump right into it. London's most notorious serial killer prowled the East End over a century ago, preying on prostitutes and terrorizing the area. He made his mark as Jack the Ripper by killing and mutilating at least 5 women. Dread grew as the dead bodies began to pile up near each other within a 3-month period in 1888. The neighborhood was, in quote, horrified to a degree bordering on panic when news broke of a second female victim, the Morning Post reported at the time. The local newspaper called the killings, in quote, barbarous, and said the manner of murder was, in quote, too horrible for description. Local authorities, at first, wondered whether the suspect was a butcher or a doctor due to his signature and gory method of murder, and his skill with a knife. The victims of the so-called Whitechapel murders, Mary Ann Nicholas, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly, all had their throats slashed, and most of them had their stomachs slit and organs ripped out before they were dumped on the streets, according to author Dave Yost, who explores the 5 deaths in his book Elizabeth Stride and Jack the Ripper. The FBI, which analyzed the case in 1988 at the behest of a movie production company, said each victim was known to be a heavy drinker and a prostitute. They were all targeted because they were readily accessible and were killed swiftly in the early morning hours. Even with all eyes on the case, police were never able to put a face on the killer. The FBI said local investigations were stemmed because forensic technology and other advanced means of thoroughly investigating homicides were, in quote, non existent at the time. The National Archives obtained letters exchanged between different law enforcement bosses in 1888 that depict overwhelming police departments. Charles Warren, who was the chief commissioner of the Metropolitan Police at the time, asked for help from a City of London police. In quote, we are inundated with suggestions and names of suspects, end quote, Warren wrote. Countless historians and criminologists, both amateur and professional, have speculated on the killer's identity, but it appears Jack the Ripper took his secret to the grave. Wow, what a one to start off with. Okay, so there's a lot in that I'd like to talk about. First of all, I find it interesting, I would say, that a lot of murders, obviously not all, but a lot of murders um, target people. They have trauma in their life that has caused them to murder. For instance, this man, he only kills women, or so-called man. No one knows who he or she is, but this person, Jack the Ripper, um, only targets women, only targets alcoholics, and only targeted prostitutes, which is interesting because you want to think, why is he targeting this specific group? Was there trauma in his life that caused him to do that? Is there reasoning behind it, or is it just he just doesn't like women? I mean, there's a lot of people who are just like that. So it's really interesting to hear these stories and just wonder what drove them to this. What could crack someone's mind so much that they would go to murder? And it's just, I don't even know. It's crazy to think. I mean, a murder, taking someone else's life is such a sacred thing. I don't even think, even if I wanted to kill someone, I mean, I have. Everyone has. Sometimes in people's lives, you just sit there and you think, I kind of want to kill someone. Like, if you're really angry at someone, you're like, oh, I'm going to kill you, but you're not serious. You're just joking, or you're just trying to vent. But in this case, and with a lot of cases, people just are angry enough and driven enough and diluted enough to murder, and that just It boggles my mind. I don't know how that's even possible. But in any case, we can't dwell on that. So let's go to the number 3, since we're skipping number 2. And we're going to read The Zodiac Killer Taunted Police with Clues. So I do know a little bit about this case. What I do know is that the Zodiac Killer, he put clues in every murder. I believe he sent letters to the police whenever he murdered and kind of tried to give them hints as to his identity. But he liked the attention, I think. But let's read on and see what this has to say for him. The Zodiac Killer was no ordinary murderer. Rather than avoiding the spotlight, he craved media attention and seemed to enjoy taunting police with cryptic notes and clues as he left a trail of death behind him. The Zodiac Killer murdered 5 people, seemingly at random, in Northern California in 1968 and 1969. He claimed in letters to police that there were dozens more victims, although that was never confirmed. His deadly rampage began in December 1968, when 2 teenagers were shot to death in a parking lot. About 7 months later, another 2 people were shot in a parking lot, although one survived. That's when local newspapers started getting letters from someone anonymously claiming to be responsible for the slayings, according to the San Francisco Examiner, which had received the cryptic notes. The newspaper said the letters contained coded messages explaining the killer's motive, as well as a key to help readers decipher his identity. This is the Zodiac speaking, he wrote in an August letter. I like killing people because it is so much fun, he added, according to FBI records. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest because man is the most dangerous animal of all. Authorities did not crack the code revealing his name, and the Zodiac Killer went on to stab 2 more people in late September. One of the victims survived, and the other died. About 2 weeks later, the killer struck again, fatally shooting a 29-year-old taxi driver, according to the Examiner. Days later, the Zodiac mailed a piece of his latest victim's bloody shirt to the Chronicle newspaper. To this day, no suspects have been confirmed in the case. The San Francisco Police Department said the investigation is ongoing. Wow, okay, so I find that interesting because if you look at, if you compare the Zodiac Killer with the first one that we read, with the first story, they seem to be polar opposites because you have the first story, which is talking about someone who takes enough time to slash the throats of women, and I want to point out specifically women, specifically prostitutes and alcoholics. He slits their throats, throws their organs on the ground, very, very bloody, very malicious. And then you have this person, this Zodiac Killer, who only shoots I mean, I'm not saying shooting is better, but he shoots them, doesn't do anything, I guess, time consuming. He wants to get it over with. But unlike the first one, this person likes the attention. They enjoy, they get a thrill out of like bringing the police in and getting the press to get scared and sending letters. And it just shows 2 different kinds of minds of murderers. And there's 2 people out there. There's one that does it because they have a craving for blood, and then you have another one that it seems they have a craving for, I don't know, fame. And what's even more interesting is that this killer, he enjoys the fame. He enjoys sitting in the spotlight, and to me, I kind of think about, why does he enjoy that? Why does he enjoy the spotlight? Why does he enjoy the does he want to kill for the spotlight? Does he want to kill because he feels the urge to, or does he kill because he wants to be popular and famous? It's just very interesting to me. It's interesting just to see all of these different killers, these different means of how they kill, and you can really learn a lot just from what these say. You can learn a lot from their mind, or at least you think you can. But at the same time, these killers are, you can't analyze their brain because these are normal people that are able to act normal until they're killing. So you could walk by someone, they could seem normal, and then they could just murder someone, and you wouldn't know it. So I said a lot about that one. I'm gonna leave it there. I have a lot more I want to say, but we should move on to the next one. This is 4 and 5. Rappers Tupac Shakur and the notorious B.I.G. or Big were gunned down 6 months apart. So I'm not very familiar with these rappers. I have heard some of their songs, but I don't know honestly how to pronounce their names correctly, so forgive me if I say them wrong. The music world was rocked in the late 1990s when rap superstars Tupac Shakur and the notorious Big or Big were gunned down about 6 months apart. The killings came at a moment marked by intense rivalry between their competing record labels. Both rappers were the top artists for the record companies. Many said the murders were a sign music feud that had gone too far. Shakur was the first killed in a drive-by shooting in Las Vegas on September 13th, 1996. At the time, the 25-year-old superstar's Death Row record label had been feuding with its competitor, Bad Boy. 6 months later, Bad Boy's Christopher Wallace, better known as the notorious Biggie Smalls, or Biggie, was killed in a similar fashion. The rapper was fatally shot in a drive-by as he was leaving a music industry party in Los Angeles. Now, before I continue, I want to comment on, I think it's interesting that at the time they were feuding and both of them were killed by a drive-by. So it seems, I don't know, it seems like it's too much of a coincidence, but let's read on. The two superstars had been friends when both were signed under Bad Boy, according to the FBI, which investigated Biggie's murder, but closed the case in 2005. The pals grew distant after Tupac landed in jail over convictions that included rape, and Biggie rose in popularity. Tupac later switched over to Death Row. It is unclear whether the rivalry played a role in either killing. Both cases stumped police, in part because of uncooperative witnesses. The murder mysteries amassed their own collection of theories, including an unproven one that claims both rappers are still alive and faked their own deaths. That's also interesting because you see XXX Tentacion, which is the most recent rap superstar, if you want to call him that. People are saying he faked his own death. So I think that's an interesting trend that happens. Family and friends of the megastars are still mourning. In March, on the 20th anniversary of Biggie's death, Sean Diddy Combs paid tribute to his late friend in an Instagram video. In quote, "On this day, we're going to reflect on him because we miss him," he said. And 20 years later, time heals all wounds, but this one ain't healing yet. So, I think the saddest thing for me is, and not a lot of these stories show you the mourning behind a murder, and hearing that, it's just crazy to think that people have to live with that. People have to live with not knowing what happened to someone they loved. It's just, they're gone. And from one day you were hanging out with them, and then they're just gone. And you can't do anything about it. You're just powerless. And that would really hurt me. And I think that would hurt a lot of people if you lost someone that you loved and you weren't able to do anything about it. I just think that's probably one of the hardest things to deal with, and it shows it in this one very briefly in this story how mourning can be. And it even shows when people say that he faked his own death and he's still alive. That's a form of mourning. That's people trying to believe that they're still alive because it's too hard for them to believe that they're actually dead. So just believing that they're somewhere else and they're hiding, it's easier for them. It's just interesting how the human brain works and fights mourning. Let's read number 6. This is probably going to be the last story. I don't know, though. Number 6 is called John Bennett Ramsey was found dead in her family home. All right, let's read. John Bennett Ramsey's young, smiling face stared out from the newspaper front pages and television screens all across the country in the months after the 6-year-old beauty queen was found dead in the basement of her family's Colorado home. The crime stunned the quiet and affluent neighborhood of Boulder, Colorado. John Bennett was a beautiful pageant winner, had been discovered beaten and strangled with duct tape placed on her mouth and throat on the day after Christmas in 1996. This was already disturbing enough to draw national attention, but John Bennett's own family quickly fell under scrutiny, as many who had followed the story began to speculate on whether her parents were somehow involved. John Bennett's mother, Patricia, told police she woke up early in the morning to find her daughter missing. She called 911 to report a kidnapping, saying she found a nearly 3-page ransom note demanding $118,000. Hours later, John Bennett's father, John, told police he discovered his daughter's body in the basement. An autopsy determined that John Bennett died of asphyxiation caused by strangulation, according to the Denver Post. Her death was ruled a homicide. The Ramseys immediately fell under the cloud of suspicion, but no one was ever charged in connection with John Bennett's death. Her parents addressed the speculation for the first time during an interview with CNN in January. John Ramsey said the suggestion that his family was behind the crime was, in quote, nauseating beyond belief, according to the Post. In quote, I did not kill my daughter, end quote, he told reporters again in May. 20 years later, Boulder police said the investigation is still open, although officials declined to comment on the case. In quote, our goal continues to be an arrest and successful prosecution, Boulder Police Chief Greg Tessa said in last fall. We have not and will not give up. The recent 20th anniversary of John Bennett's death was met with a wave of major network specials and new documentaries that explored potential suspects. John Bennett's brother, Burke Ramsey, also spoke out for the first time. The 29-year-old said on Dr. Phil that he burst into tears when he first found out his sister was dead. In quote, my dad told me John Bennett was in heaven now, and he started crying. Then I started crying. I was kind of like, how is this possible? I started crying. I don't think I said anything. I didn't believe it at first. Oh, okay. So those are stories where children get hurt and are murdered or anything like that. Those are the stories that really affect me. Just knowing that the 6-year-old girl who could have a, a beautiful life ahead of her, she could be doing amazing things, her life was cut short because someone was so angry or so messed up in the head or was bullied so bad that they just took it out on their 6-year-old. And what's even harder for me to believe is that people think it's the parents. I'm not saying it wasn't the parents, but if you can imagine not only losing a son or a daughter or even just a family member, but then people believing it was you when possibly it wasn't, it's just having to deal with all of that. It's beyond my comprehension. I just don't know how anyone could deal with that. It's just, wow. I can't even, I don't even have words to describe how this makes me feel. I just don't know how someone could hurt someone so little and so innocent. Because it's more understandable. Again, I'm not saying it's okay if you murder an adult. I'm not saying it's okay if you hurt an adult, because it's not. But it's especially wrongful, in my opinion, if you do it to a child, because they're little, they're innocent, they can't defend themselves, they can't do anything. They're little kids. It just ends there. They're little kids. You shouldn't hurt little kids. I mean, even in the news lately, you see little kids being abused by their parents. I even saw a story. It was about, I think it was like a 6-month-old who had been beaten to a pulp by the father and almost died, but somehow survived. But she had massive brain damage. It's permanent. How can you be so fucked up in the head, excuse my language, that you would want to hurt a baby? I'm just gonna end it there. I have a lot to say about that, but I don't even have the words for it. It's just that really bothers me. It bothers me that somebody could hurt a 6-year-old child. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you guys next time.